She thought I was hopelessly old-fashioned and my garden was just a mess. But when her perfect world crumbled, she came seeking sanctuary in my junk heap. She had no idea that the chaos of my garden was my strength, and her desperate plea was my opportunity. What happened next changed not only her wedding, but her life. The day my son, Mark, introduced me to his fiancée, Julia, I knew trouble was brewing. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that's supposed to be filled with sunshine and simple pleasures. I had spent the morning tending to my garden, a sprawling, untamed paradise I had poured my heart and soul into for over 20 years. I called it my secret garden, a place where the world's noise couldn't reach me. It was a beautiful mess of lavender, hydrangeas, wild roses, and overgrown ivy, humming with the life of bees and birds. To me, it was a masterpiece. To Julia, as I would soon learn, it was a junk heap. She arrived with Mark, dressed in an outfit that looked like it cost more than my first car, her heels sinking into the soft earth of my lawn. Her face was a perfect mask of polite disapproval. Mark beamed, oblivious to the storm brewing in her eyes. "Mom," he said, wrapping an arm around her. "This is Julia. Julia, this is my mom." Julia offered a tight, careful smile. "It's so lovely to finally meet you, Mrs. Peterson. Mark has told me so much about you." The words were perfect, but her tone was as cold as a January morning. We made our way to the back patio, and she took one look at my garden, my sanctuary, my canvas, and her smile vanished. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "What is all of this?" Mark, bless his clueless heart, chuckled. "That's Mom's garden. It's her happy place." "Happy place?" she scoffed, her gaze sweeping over my handiwork with a mix of disgust and pity. "It's a complete mess, Mark. It looks like an old lady's junk heap. I mean, look at all this. The weeds are out of control, and the roses are just wild. It's so unorganized." The words hit me like a physical blow. A junk heap. The roses were wild because they were supposed to be. They were heirloom roses passed down from my grandmother. They didn't grow in neat, predictable rows. They grew with a beautiful, chaotic energy. They were a part of me. I forced a smile, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "I prefer to call it natural," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I like things to have character." "Character?" she laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "It just looks like you've given up. This is not a garden, Mrs. Peterson. This is a liability." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Julia, that's not nice." "I'm just being honest, Mark. You know I'm all about clean lines and order. My parents have a landscaper who comes every week. Their garden is pristine. It's perfect for entertaining. This this is a project." The word project hung in the air, a thinly veiled insult. I wasn't just old, I was a project, a fixer-upper, something to be tamed, pruned, and put in its proper place. But a woman my age knows a thing or two about being a project. She knows that sometimes the best projects are the ones you leave alone. We went inside and the conversation shifted to wedding plans. They talked about caterers, venues, and photographers, their words a whirlwind of expensive, distant ideas that had no connection to my simple life. They made it clear that my opinion was not needed, and that my taste was in fact a liability. I was a relic from a time when weddings were about family, not about social status. As the evening wore on, Julia continued her passive-aggressive attacks, criticizing my curtains, the mismatched chairs, and even the way I poured coffee. Every jab was a reminder that I was not good enough, that my life was not good enough, and that I was a living, breathing testament to everything she was trying to escape. When they finally left, the house felt heavy and suffocating. I walked back out into the garden, the place she had so disdainfully called a junk heap. I knelt down and ran my hands through the soil, feeling its cool, familiar comfort. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. The air was filled with the scent of lavender and the promise of a peaceful night. And that's when a new kind of calm settled over me. It was cold and hard, and it had a purpose. They wanted to plan their perfect life, their perfect wedding, without me. Fine, but they had no idea what they were about to ask of me. They had no idea that they were about to come begging for the very thing she had so cruelly mocked. If you want to know what happened next, you'll need to subscribe to our channel for new videos that come out every day. You won't believe how she turns a humiliating insult into the ultimate revenge. The next day, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was Mark. "Mom, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice a mix of exasperation and guilt. "Julia is still upset. She says you were rude to her. She says you called her garden pristine in a sarcastic way. She said you made her feel like, well, like a project." I almost laughed. The irony was so rich it could have been served with a fork. "I said her parents' garden was pristine, Mark. She's the one who called mine a junk heap, and she's the one who called me a project." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Well, she didn't mean it like that," he said. "The old familiar excuse. She just has high standards. She's a perfectionist." "A perfectionist?" I repeated, a low hum of sarcasm in my voice. "Right. So I should just rip out my life's work and replace it with something that meets her standards? Is that what you're saying?" "No, Mom," he sighed, the sound of a man caught between two immovable objects. "I'm saying maybe you could just tone it down a bit for the wedding." The wedding. The word hung in the air, a source of all my current pain and anxiety. "The wedding?" I said. "What does my garden have to do with the wedding? You're not getting married in my backyard, are you?" The thought was so absurd, it made me feel a little dizzy. "No, of course not," he said, too quickly. "We've got the most beautiful venue picked out. It's a country club with a golf course. It's perfect. It's nothing like your garden." The jab, though subtle, was still a jab, and it stung. "Well, that's a relief," I said, my voice as dry as a desert. "I'm so glad my liability of a yard won't be ruining your perfect day." He ignored the sarcasm. He always did. "Look, Mom, Julia's just stressed. Wedding planning is hard. Can you just let this go? She wants us to be a family." "A family?" I said, the word a bitter taste in my mouth. "Does a family call you a junk heap and a project? Does a family try to make you feel worthless because your life isn't as perfect as theirs?" He didn't have an answer. He never did. He just said he loved me and that he would call me later. When I hung up, I felt a deep, abiding sadness. He wasn't defending her. He was defending himself. He was defending the perfect, pristine life he was trying to build with her, a life that apparently had no room for my messy, beautiful existence. I went back outside, a sudden burst of energy surging through me. I didn't want to just let this go. I wanted to prove to her that my junk heap was so much more than she could ever imagine. I looked at the unruly roses, the wild lavender, the chaotic beauty of it all. I saw a story in every petal, a memory in every vine. My garden wasn't just a collection of plants. It was a testament to a life lived fully, honestly, and without shame. I decided right then and there that I would not let this go.
I would not apologize for who I was or for the garden I had created, and I certainly would not let her get away with what she had said. I didn't know what my plan was, but I knew I had one. She wanted a war? She was about to get one. But this wasn't going to be a war fought with words. It was going to be a war fought with flowers. The true nature of her plan is about to be revealed, and you won't want to miss how she uses her so-called junk heap to turn her greatest humiliation into her ultimate triumph.
The days that followed were a blur of furious gardening. I worked from dawn until dusk, fueled by a potent cocktail of indignation and inspiration. I wasn't just pulling weeds, I was exorcising demons. With every thorn I pruned and every unruly vine I tamed, I felt a little piece of my soul returning to me. I had to admit, the garden was a little unkempt, but it was a wild, glorious unkemptness, a kind of natural beauty that Julia, with her perfectly manicured lawn, would never understand. I took out all my old books on landscaping and gardening, poring over them like sacred texts. I researched heirloom plants and rare flowers, learning about their history and their symbolism. I found a new purpose in every little detail. I realized that my garden was an extension of my life, a living testament to a woman who had survived and thrived, not in spite of, but because of her flaws. My neighbor, a kind and elderly man named Arthur, saw my newfound passion and came over to help. He was a retired landscape architect, and he knew a thing or two about gardens. He saw the beauty in my mess, the potential in my chaos. "You know, Mrs. Peterson," he said, his face crinkled with a warm smile, "this garden isn't a junk heap. It's a memory. It's a story. You just have to tell it the right way." His words resonated with me, and together we began to transform the garden, not into a sterile, perfect version of itself, but into a more organized, more beautiful version of its wild, natural state. We built a small stone path, we pruned the overgrown bushes, and we even built a little pond with a tiny waterfall. We worked for weeks, our hands covered in dirt, our clothes stained with mud and grass. It was the most fulfilling work I had done in years. As the garden began to take shape, I started a little video diary on my phone. I filmed myself working, talking about the history of the plants, sharing stories about my life, and even poking a little fun at myself. I talked about how my garden was a metaphor for life, how sometimes you have to embrace the mess to find the beauty. I laughed and cried and talked to the camera as if it were an old friend. And then one day, I got a text from Mark. "Mom, can you call me? It's important." I called him back, my heart pounding with a familiar mix of hope and dread. "Mom," he said, his voice full of a strained politeness, "Julia and we have a favor to ask. We had a little problem with our venue." I smiled. A little problem. I had a feeling I knew exactly what that little problem was. "Oh," I said, my voice as sweet as honey. "What kind of problem?" "The place we booked, the one with the pristine lawn, it went out of business, and we can't find another venue in time. Julia's so upset. She's been crying for days." I listened, a triumphant smile spreading across my face. It was perfect. She had called my garden a junk heap, a liability. Now she had no place to get married, and I had the perfect place. A garden that once had been a symbol of my shame was now their only option. I knew exactly what they were going to ask me to do, and I had a plan. A beautiful, perfect, and utterly ruthless plan. What they don't know is that the garden isn't just a garden, it's a living monument to her spirit. You'll want to see how she uses her garden to teach them a lesson about life and the true meaning of beauty.
The days that followed were a surreal ballet of passive aggression and barely contained desperation. Mark and Julia called me every day, their voices a strange mix of pleading and entitlement. They tried every angle. Mark appealed to my motherly duty. Julia tried to butter me up, praising my charming little garden. It was sickening. She, the woman who had called my garden a junk heap, was now gushing about its rustic charm. The hypocrisy was a symphony of beautiful, delicious vindication. "Mother, we're so sorry about what we said," Julia said on one of her many phone calls, her voice as smooth as silk. "We were just so stressed. You know how it is. We were just trying to find the perfect venue, and we were so caught up in the details. We would be absolutely honored if you would let us get married in your backyard. It's perfect for a rustic, intimate wedding." I'd let the silence hang in the air, a space for her to fill with her frantic, self-serving words. The irony was so perfect, it almost made me laugh. My junk heap was now perfect. My liability was now a rustic, intimate venue. Oh, how the tables had turned. "Well," I said, my voice as sweet as sugar, "I'm not sure. It's a lot of work. And, a garden like mine, it's not exactly pristine. I wouldn't want to ruin your perfect day." "Oh, it's not perfect without you, Mother," she chirped, a panicked note in her voice. "We've learned our lesson. We've realized that a true family is more important than a perfect backdrop. We're not looking for perfect anymore. We're looking for love." The words were so fake, they almost made me choke. "Love?" I said, a dangerous edge in my voice. "Is that what you call it? You've spent a year calling me a project, a volunteer, and a liability. And now, because your fancy venue went out of business, you've suddenly discovered love. I'm afraid, darling, that's not love. That's desperation. And desperation is not a good look on you." I hung up before she could respond, a feeling of cold, righteous satisfaction settling in my bones. I wasn't just doing this for revenge. I was doing it for me. I was doing it for every woman who had ever been made to feel small and irrelevant. I was doing it to prove to myself that my life was not, and had never been, a junk heap. Later that day, I got a text from Mark. "Mom, please. We have nowhere else to go. We'll pay you, whatever you want." The message was so simple, so desperate, so heartbreakingly familiar. He wasn't asking for my love, he was asking for my garden. He wasn't defending me, he was defending his perfect, pristine life. And I knew exactly how to make them realize what they had been missing. I texted him back. "The garden is not for sale, Mark, but I'll make you a deal. You and Julia need to come over, and you need to see what my junk heap has become." They arrived the next day, their faces a mix of hope and trepidation. They were dressed in designer clothes, a stark contrast to my worn-out gardening gloves and dirt-stained jeans. They walked through my garden, their eyes wide with a silent, shocked awe. The small stone path, the tiny waterfall, the carefully pruned roses. It was a masterpiece. The junk heap was gone, replaced by a beautiful, organized, and utterly magnificent sanctuary. Julia's jaw was practically on the ground. She was speechless. My chaotic mess had become a work of art. She had no words for it, no insults to throw, no condescending remarks to make. Her perfect, pristine world had no place for this kind of wild, beautiful, untamed artistry. "Mother," Miss Mark whispered, his voice full of a genuine, awestruck admiration. "It's beautiful. It's incredible." I smiled. "It's not perfect, Daniel. It's just real. And it's not for sale. But," I paused, letting the silence hang in the air, "I'll let you get married here under one condition." The silence was a thick, tangible thing, a cloak of stunned awe that had fallen over Mark and Julia. The junk heap they had so casually mocked was now a breathtaking sanctuary, a masterpiece of untamed beauty and meticulous care. Julia's perfect facade had finally cracked, revealing a raw, panicked vulnerability. Mark, my sweet, clueless boy, simply stood there, his eyes wide with a genuine admiration that was almost as painful to see as her scorn had been. "Mother," he whispered, his voice full of a reverence I hadn't heard in years. "This is unbelievable. How did you—" "A lot of work," I said, a dry, satisfied smile playing on my lips. "And a little help from a friend. Now, as I said, the garden is not for sale. But you can get married here. On one condition." Julia's eyes, which had been fixed on the perfectly pruned roses, snapped to my face. "Condition?" she said, her voice a little too high, a little too strained. "What condition? We'll pay you. Whatever you want. We'll sign a contract. Whatever you need." "This isn't about money, darling," I said, my voice as calm as a summer breeze. "This is about respect and humility, things you seem to have misplaced." I walked over to the little stone path and sat on a small bench I had built with Arthur. I gestured for them to join me. They hesitated, looking uncomfortable and out of place in their designer clothes. They were used to negotiating in boardrooms, not in a garden filled with the messy, unpredictable beauty of nature. "The condition is this," I began, my gaze sweeping over my garden, my masterpiece. "The wedding will be in a month, and every day from now until the wedding, you and Mark will come here. You will spend 6 hours a day in this garden. You will help me with the weeding, the pruning, the planting. You will learn to love this garden the way I do." They stared at me, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. 6 hours a day? Mom, we have jobs. We have a life. We have a wedding to plan. "This is part of the planning," I said, my voice firm and uncompromising. "You will learn that a garden isn't a project you can just throw money at. It's a living thing. It requires time and effort and love. You've been so focused on your pristine, perfect lives that you've forgotten to get your hands dirty. And I'm going to teach you. And you will do it, or you will find another venue for your wedding." Julia's face went from pale to red. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, her facade of politeness finally crumbling. "You're trying to punish us. This is blackmail." "Blackmail?" I said, a cold, hard laugh escaping my lips. "No, darling, this is a lesson in humility. And I'm afraid you're both in desperate need of a good one. Besides, you said yourself that a true family is more important than a perfect backdrop. This is a chance for us to be a true family, to work together, to love each other. Isn't that what you said?" Julia's jaw clenched. She looked at Mark, a silent plea for him to back me up, to tell me I was crazy. But Mark, for once, was silent. He looked at me, then at the garden, and I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He saw the truth. He saw that this wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. The final act of this story is about to begin. You won't want to miss how she uses her garden to get her ultimate revenge, revealing a truth that will forever change her son and his wife's relationship.
The next day, they showed up at exactly 9 in the morning, dressed in brand new matching green gardening gear that looked suspiciously expensive. They looked more like they were starring in a reality show about gardening than actually doing any work. I, on the other hand, was in my usual uniform, a worn-out flannel shirt, a pair of old jeans, and my trusty gardening gloves. I handed them each a trowel. Here you go, I said, a little too cheerfully. Let's start with the weeds around the roses. They're choking the life out of my poor babies. Julia stared at the trowel as if it were a poisonous snake. Weeds, she said, her voice a strained whisper. Mother, do you have a landscaper? This is what landscapers are for. I told you, darling, I said, my smile unwavering. We are our own landscapers. You said you wanted to be a true family. Well, a true family gets its hands dirty together. They started to work, and it was a sight to behold. Julia's movements were clumsy and uncertain. She poked at the ground with the trowel as if she were afraid of what she might find. She gasped when she touched a worm. Mark, bless his heart, tried to look like he knew what he was doing, but he was just as clueless. He kept accidentally pulling up my prized petunias instead of the weeds. That's a petunia, honey, I said, a little too sweetly. We want to keep those. They're a classic. They worked for an hour, their backs bent, their faces glistening with sweat. They kept glancing at their watches as if they couldn't believe so little time had passed. I, on the other hand, was in my usual uniform, a worn-out flannel shirt, a pair of old jeans, and my trusty gardening gloves. I renowned my free order. Cats of this model were completed. Allow you to sit and watch flubs and zoom on the last one. Mark, bless his heart, tried to look like he was doing something useful, but that was just another show. We'll see you tomorrow, I said, with a final cheerful wave. They nodded, their faces too tired for a response. As they walked away, I saw Julia rub her back, her face a mask of pain and resentment. They were a long way from a perfect life. But I knew this was just the beginning. I knew that they had no idea what was coming. I had a whole garden to work on, a lifetime of lessons to teach them. And the best part? They had no idea about the witness in my garage, which was a document that would expose their real plans to me and could change everything. And you won't want to miss the shocking revelation she has been hiding. It will make them question everything they thought they knew about her and her garden. It's a truth that will turn this battle of wills into a moral showdown, and the consequences will be something they never saw coming. The next morning, they arrived looking like two soldiers who had just been defeated in a long, grueling battle. Their perfect gardening outfits were now stained with dirt and grass. Their faces, usually so pristine, were a road map of exhaustion and resentment. Julia's hands were covered in Band-Aids, a silent testament to the little thorns and calluses she had acquired in the war against the weeds. Mark, bless his heart, had a giant mosquito bite on his forehead that looked like a third eye. The perfect, pristine facade of their lives was cracking, and I was enjoying every single second of it. "Good morning," I said, my voice as cheerful as a chirping bird. "Let's start with the compost pile. It needs to be turned, to aerate the soil. It's an important part of the process." They stared at the massive pile of rotting leaves and food scraps as if it were a monument to everything they despised. The smell alone was enough to make Julia's nose wrinkle. She was a woman who lived in a world of designer perfumes and air fresheners. This was her worst nightmare. "Compost?" she said, her voice a strained whisper. "Mother, do you have any idea how much money we could just pay someone to do this? This is barbaric." "Barbaric?" I said, a dangerous edge to my voice. "My dear, there is nothing barbaric about life. There is nothing barbaric about getting your hands dirty and connecting with the earth. It's a privilege. It's a blessing. And it's something you, with all your pristine perfection, have never truly experienced." They reluctantly started to work, their movements clumsy and slow. Julia kept trying to use a small hand shovel to turn the pile, which was about as effective as trying to move a mountain with a spoon. Mark, on the other hand, was trying to use a pitchfork, but he kept getting tangled in the vines and stumbling over the rocks. I watched them, a feeling of detached amusement settling over me. They were so out of their element, so lost in a world that didn't revolve around money and social status. As the morning wore on, they began to bicker. "This is your fault," Julia hissed at Mark. "If you had just found a better venue, we wouldn't be here." "My fault?" Mark shot back. "I'm the one who's trying to save our wedding. You're the one who was so obsessed with a perfect venue that you didn't see the signs. You're the one who insulted my mother." Their argument grew louder, their voices filled with all the resentment and frustration they had been bottling up for years. I listened, a silent observer in my own drama. It was a beautiful, ugly thing. All their perfect, pristine lies were unraveling right in front of me. I realized that my revenge wasn't just about making them suffer. It was about forcing them to see the truth about themselves, the truth about their relationship, the truth about the hollow, empty lives they had been building. Around noon, I offered them a lunch of homemade lemonade and sandwiches. They ate in silence, their faces grim, their bodies aching. They looked defeated. They looked human. After lunch, I took them to the rose bushes. "These roses," I said, my voice soft, "they're called heirloom roses. My grandmother passed them down to my mother, and my mother passed them down to me. They've been in our family for generations. They're wild. They're unpredictable. They have thorns. But they're also beautiful. They have a history. They have a story. And they've survived everything." Julia looked at the roses, a flicker of something new in her eyes. It wasn't awe. It wasn't respect. It was something else. It was fear. She was afraid of the beauty she couldn't control. She was afraid of the history she couldn't erase. "Now," I said, my voice suddenly cheerful again, "we're going to prune them. You have to be careful. You have to be gentle. You have to respect them." They worked for the rest of the afternoon, their movements more deliberate now, more thoughtful. They were learning. They were changing. The thorns pricked them, the leaves scratched their skin, but they kept going. I realized that this wasn't just about a garden. It was about a lesson in resilience, a lesson in humility, a lesson in the messy, beautiful, unpredictable reality of life. The final act of this story is about to begin. You won't want to miss how she uses her garden to get her ultimate revenge, revealing a truth that will forever change her son and his wife's relationship. The rest of the week was a testament to the old saying, "The truth will set you free," even if that truth felt like a punishment. Every day they showed up, their bodies aching, their faces pale with exhaustion. The 6-hour shift in the garden was no longer a punishment, it was a reckoning. Julia's pristine hands were now a mess of dirt, calluses, and broken nails. Mark's posture, once so confident and upright, was now a weary slump. Their perfect, curated lives were unraveling in my garden, and all I had to do was sit back and watch. The bickering didn't stop. It just grew more intense, more personal. "Why are you doing this to us?" Julia would hiss, her voice a strained whisper as she pulled out a stubborn weed. "You're just punishing us because we're successful, because we have a real life." "A real life?" Mark would retort, his voice filled with a desperate, bitter edge. "You call this a real life? We're so stressed out we can't even stand each other. We're so worried about what everyone thinks that we can't even enjoy what we have. This isn't a life, Julia. It's a performance." I watched them, a silent observer in their drama. I realized that my revenge wasn't just about making them suffer. It was about forcing them to see the truth about themselves, the truth about their relationship, the truth about the hollow, empty lives they had been building. One afternoon, I sat in the shade, watching them struggle with a particularly thorny patch of ivy. Julia's face was a mask of furious frustration, her hands bleeding from the thorns. She let out a cry of rage and threw her gardening gloves on the ground. "I can't do this anymore," she shrieked. "This is insane. I'm not a gardener. I'm a lawyer. I went to Harvard. I have a life." Mark simply stood there, his shoulders slumped, his face grim. "Then go, Julia," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Go back to your life. Go back to your performance. I'm staying." She stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" she whispered. "What did you just say?" "I said I'm staying," he repeated, his voice filled with a new, unfamiliar strength. "I'm staying because this feels more real than anything we've done in the last 5 years. It's a mess. It's hard, but it's real, and I'm not giving up on it." She looked at him, then at me, then back at him. She saw the truth in his eyes. She saw the man she was losing, the man who was finally, for the first time in years, standing up to her. And she made a choice. She turned and walked away, her expensive shoes clacking on the stone path. She didn't look back. She just left. Mark and I sat there in silence for a long, long time. The only sound was the rustle of the leaves and the quiet hum of the bees. Finally, he said, his voice breaking, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything." I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man he had become, the man who had finally, in my old lady's junk heap, found his way back home. I reached out and took his hand, my calloused fingers wrapping around his. "I know, honey. I know." And it was in that moment, in the quiet, simple beauty of the garden, that the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. He had found his way back, but Julia was gone. And I knew that there was something she still didn't know, something that was about to change everything. The silence that followed Julia's departure was not a heavy, suffocating silence, but a quiet, fragile one. It was the sound of a storm passing, of the calm that comes after a hurricane. Mark and I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the only sound the rustle of the leaves and the quiet hum of the bees. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I could see it all in his eyes, the shame, the guilt, the heartbreak. He had lost his perfect life, and with it, the woman who had helped him build it. But he had also found something else, a sense of peace, a sense of rightness, a sense of home. I broke the silence. "Are you going to be okay?" I asked, my voice soft. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the ground. "Yeah, Mom, I think so. I... I'm so sorry for everything, for the way I've been, for the way I've treated you." "I know, honey," I said, a wave of emotion washing over me. "I know." And it was in that moment, in the quiet, simple beauty of the garden, that the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. He had found his way back, but Julia was gone, and I knew that there was something she still didn't know, something that was about to change everything. He stayed for dinner. We sat in the kitchen, just the two of us, like we used to. We didn't talk about Julia. We didn't talk about the garden. We just talked. We talked about his life, his work, his dreams. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I was talking to my son again, the real him, the one who wasn't hiding behind a facade of perfection and pretense. The next day, Mark came back, but this time he wasn't wearing his fancy gardening clothes. He was in an old t-shirt and jeans, his hands already calloused and dirty. He didn't say a word. He just started working. He pulled weeds, he watered the flowers, he pruned the roses. He was no longer a project. He was a son. And I was no longer a volunteer. I was a mother. Days turned into weeks. The wedding was a distant memory, a nightmare we had all woken up from. Mark and I worked on the garden together, our hands covered in dirt, our clothes stained with mud and grass. We talked, we laughed, we cried. We rebuilt our relationship one weed at a time. And then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Julia. She stood there, her face a mask of furious desperation. Her hair was a mess. Her makeup was smudged. Her perfect, pristine facade was gone, replaced by a raw, furious, vulnerable anger. She shrieked, her voice a strained whisper. "You ruined my life. You took everything from me. You took my husband. You took my wedding. You took my life." I looked at her, then at Mark, who had just walked out of the garage. He stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, a silent, comforting presence. He wasn't the boy who had once let her walk all over him. He was a man. "I didn't take anything from you, Julia," I said, my voice calm and firm. "You gave it all away. You gave up on love, you gave up on family, you gave up on a life that was real, and you lost everything because of it." She looked at Mark, her eyes pleading. "Mark, tell her this isn't right. Tell her we belong together." He didn't say a word. He just shook his head, his eyes filled with a sad, gentle pity. He had made his choice, and it wasn't her. Julia stood there, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. She had been so sure she was the one in control. She had been so certain she had the upper hand. And she had no idea that all this time, the true inheritance, the real family, was right here in my old lady's junk heap. The final chapter of this story is more than a confrontation. It's a reckoning. You won't want to miss how she uses her final weapon to reveal the truth that will forever change her family's legacy. The silence that followed Julia's outburst was as thick and heavy as the summer air. She stood there, her face a mask of furious desperation, while Mark and I stood together, a silent, unified front. The woman who had once demanded perfection from the world was now a broken mess, her meticulously constructed life crumbling around her. Her accusations hung in the air, hollow and baseless. "You took my life," she shrieked again, her voice cracking. "You ruined everything." I looked at Mark, and I saw a new strength in his eyes, a resolve I hadn't seen since he was a boy. He was a man now. He had made his choice, and it wasn't her. "Julia," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "no one took anything from you. You gave it all away. You gave up on love. You gave up on family. You gave up on a life that was real. And you lost everything because of it." She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "Mark, tell her. Tell her this isn't right. Tell her we belong together." He didn't say a word. He just shook his head, his eyes filled with a sad, gentle pity. He had made his choice, and it wasn't her. Julia stood there, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. She had been so sure she was the one in control. She had been so certain she had the upper hand. And she had no idea that all this time, the true inheritance, the real family was right here in my old lady's junk heap. And then I took a step forward. "Julia," I said, my voice as calm as a summer lake, "there's one more thing you need to know." I walked past them, into the garage, and grabbed a small, unassuming black box from a shelf. I walked back and handed it to her. She looked at the box, then at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, final confusion. She opened it, and her jaw dropped. Inside was a small, leather-bound book. It was a diary. My diary. The one I've been writing for the last 20 years. It's filled with everything. All my secrets, all my hopes, all my dreams, and all the things you said. Every single insult, every single lie, every single moment of condescension. It's all there. And I've been reading it to someone every single day.
Her eyes widened in a horrified realization. "Who?" she whispered, her voice a fragile, broken thing. "Who have you been reading it to?" I smiled, a slow, triumphant smile. "To my new family, Julia. The family that loves me. The family that loves me, the family that was there for me, the family that chose me." I walked over to the windows, pulled the curtains open, and looked out at the street. The Miller's house was bathed in the evening light, a warm, inviting glow. They were my family now. They were the people who showed up, who cared, who were there when no one else was. Julia stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes fixed on the empty screen. The witness was out. The secret was revealed. The story of the woman and her witness ends here. She found justice not by winning a battle, but by choosing to love the right people. She had all the power she ever needed because she was finally free to be herself.